again on a brand new Friday. The censer is ablaze, I'm cleaned, the temple has been banished, and we are ready to go. Moving right along in the Earth quadrangle of the air tablet, we're going to be calling NACO, N-A-C-O, today. And we'll see what happens. These have been getting progressively more interesting, at least for me, so I look forward to this every week. Teach me, O Creator of all things, to have correct knowledge and understanding, for your wisdom is all that I desire. Speak your word in my ear, O Creator of all things, and set your wisdom in my heart. Amen. Behold the ring! Lo, this it is. This is it wherewith all miracles and divine works and wonders were wrought by Solomon. This is it which philosophy dreameth of. This is it which the angels scarce know. This is it, and blessed by his name. Yea, his name be blessed forever. Without this I shall do nothing. Blessed be his name that encompasses all things. Wonders are in him, and his name is wonderful. Pele. His name works wonders from generation to generation. Amen. Behold the layman. As the holy table conciliates heaven and earth, let this layman which I place over my heart conciliate me to the holy table. Amen. Pa med fem med drux fem ur ged graf drux med graf med or med gal ged drux pa drux un tal fam dan or graf dan or gesig gan med un ged med graf van ur dan un pa drux ur dan ur drux un med graf med graf sef ged ur maus fam un pa gan med un graf fam maus tal ur pa drux un van un med un gan drux ur pa med drux fam ur ged graf drux med graf med or med gal ged drux pa drux un tal fam dan ur graf dan or gesig gan med un ged med graf fan ur dan un pa drux ur dan ur drux un med graf med graf sef ged ur maus fam un pa gan med un graf fam maus tal ur pa drux un van un med un gan drux ur pa med drux fam ur ged graf drux med graf med or med gal ged drux pa drux un tal fam dan ur graf dan ur gesig gan med un ged med graf van ur dan un pa drux ur dan ur drux un med graf med graf sef ged ur maus fam un pa gan med un graf fam maus tal ur pa drux un van un med un gan drux ur pa med drux fam ur ged graf drux med graf med or med gal ged drux pa drux un tal fam dan ur graf dan ur gesig gan med un ged med graf van ur dan un pa drux ur dan ur drux un med graf med graf sef ged ur maus fam un pa gan med un graf fam maus tal ur pa drux un van un med un gan drux ur pa med drux fam ur ged graf drux med graf med or med gal ged drux pa drux un tal fam dan ur graf dan or gesig gan med un ged med graf van ur dan un pa drux ur dan ur drux un med graf med graf sef ged ur maus fam un pa gan med un graf fam maus tal ur pa drux un van un med un gan drux ur pa med drux fam ur ged graf drux med graf med or med gal ged drux pa drux un tal fam dan ur graf dan or gesig gan med un ged med graf van ur dan un pa drux ur dan ur drux un med graf med graf sef ged ur maus fam un pa gan med un graf fam maus tal ur pa drux un van un med un gan drux ur Pa med fam med drux fam fam urged graf drux med graf med or med gal ged drux pa drux untal fam dan graf dan gesigan med ged med graf van dan un pa drux dan drux med graf med graf sef ged mouse fam un Pagan med graf fam mouse tal pa drux van med gan drux Medgan gisigdan van dan med graf med dan medgan dan med gisigvan graf medgan gisigdan van dan med graf med dan medgan dan med gisigvan graf medgan gisigdan van dan med graf med dan medgan dan med gisigvan graf medgan gisigdan van dan med graf med dan medgan dan med gisigvan graf medgan gisigdan van dan med graf med dan medgan dan med gisigvan graf medgan gisigdan van dan med graf med dan medgan dan med gisigvan graf medgan gisigdan van dan med graf med dan medgan dan med gisigvan graf Gales, Gethog, Thauth, Horlwin, Ilnon, Haioth, Galethog, Zafkiel, Zedekiel, Kumael, Raphael, Haniel, Mikael, Gabriel, El, Me, Ese, Iana, Akele, Azdoban, Stimkul, Ilir, Demal, Hioga, Biegia, Stimkul, Ab, Ath, Izad, Ekeye, Madimi, Esemele, An, Ave, Libla, Rokle, Hagonel, Elemes, Sabathiel, Zadkiel, Madimiel, Semeliel, Nogahel, Korabiel, Lavanel. Lua, Leng, Sach, Urch, Iad, Moz, Zir, Iad, Bab, Sna, Iad, Sor, Gru, Iad, Ser, Osth. Mikma goho piad zirkomsel Asien biab oslondo nor chis orthil gigipa undal chis ta puim ke mosple telok ka ien toltorg chis chisige im Osien dist brigda ad torzu ili ol balzarg od alla thiln os neta ab deluga vomsag lonsa kap mi ali vorskla homil kakausab fafen ezizop od mi noag deg ni tab na iel pan pir malpregi kosig pild noan unalabalt ad vuan Do o iap mad go holor go hus amiran mikma hussos ka kom od do o a in noar mi ka olz a ayom kasarm gohia zakar unikleg ad imu amar pugo plapli ananiel kwan Bazmelo ta piripson orn nazavab kasarm gvran chis vigeg dask Dsa bramg Baltoa goho ad soba miam trian tal lolchis abayunin ad azagier rior Urgel chis da dispa a ox busd kausgo de chis odipuran teloa kakrg o Isalman loncho ad voina karbaf nisso bagle avauago gohon nisso bagle mo mao siaion od mabza iad oais momar poilp nis zamran siaofis kasogo ad biliors od corsi ta a bramig Olvinu ad zakam, ilsga, NACO. Od lanchvors giiad gohus pugo ils niso ad darbs, duiap, exarp, ad duiap. Oro, iba, eospi, a duiap, ba taiva, a duiap, abiorio, aozoif. Hit morda, achaeospi, hipto hoga ad attotar. Aduia. Aiauai. Aduia. Oit. Olvinu ad zakam. Ilsga. NACO. It took quite a while for that image to stabilize, but now I have a decent picture of what this looks like. It's like a stylized X, like almost like a fractal, but not a fractal. Let's see if I can do it justice. We have an X with big V, small v, big V, small v, big V, small v, big V, small v. So the whole thing is a square shape, but with X in the middle and the V's coming off the sides. It's red, black, and green. The lines are black, and then it's alternating like red and green, like red on the upper portion, green underneath. Like, it's difficult to describe, but it's predominantly black with red and green as subtle undertones. He asked the pronunciation of the name. It's NACO. It is the same as the way I said it. There is no alteration. NACO. NACO. What do you oversee? What is your area of expertise? Separation. I have an image of like a woven tapestry that the threads are being undone and set side by side, and then reworked, undone. What is the purpose of this? This action, this separation? By separating a thing into two parts that were formerly interwoven, one can easily see any detritus or blackness or something that shouldn't be. It's easier to identify and remove that before reworking it back into itself. Like removing the spirit from the body and cleansing the spirit and cleansing the body by themselves and then re-intermeshing them. It's separating the subtle from the gross. Again, this is a common alchemical term, but it's what I've been led to say. But this is not a permanent separation. This is only temporary in order to purify one aspect or the other, or both, and then reunite them. There's a tendency for something like the personality to be so enmeshed into the body that it can crystallize and become hardened and not be pliable and not be subject to change. And so through focus, one can separate these elements from one another and then purify them on an individual basis and then reintegrate them into each other. This is done with the assistance of the higher self, of higher spirit, even God, if you'd like to use that name. And God, in this sense, to me, is a very broad and open-ended name. It's not a specific deity or being. It is literally the highest form of consciousness. I'm being shown an image of God consciousness as a sphere, perfectly clear, perfectly formed, zero imperfection, whereas a lower aspect of consciousness, such as one incarnate in a body, is like a muddy crystal. There's color involved. You can't see through it. There's facets on the inside where the crystal has been subject to pressure and fractured. Aspiring to that higher consciousness allows the higher consciousness to interweave with this down below and withdraw impurity. And the aspect of the higher consciousness is such that it can take on impurity without worry, for it can process it and incorporate it into itself without fear of sullying its existence or its clarity. So although this down here may be fractured and dense and imperfect and impure, by merely reaching out with intent to pull that God consciousness down into oneself, that will blend in with yours and can extract from you impurity or imperfection, take it into itself, purify that, and then you are left more clear and more pure. Now, this is possible to do on a constant basis, is to continually strive for that consciousness to mesh with yours, and it will do so. And over time, this can form a finer mesh, a tighter structure. Interacting with this in a purest sense will allow you to clear up any, I'm searching for the right word, any imperfection, I suppose, for lack of a better term, within oneself, and slowly incorporate aspects that are equal to the highest consciousness, to God consciousness. I'm being warned as saying God may have baggage or unintended meaning, so we're going to shift that into pure highest consciousness. That consciousness which takes little parts of itself and seeds it into flesh, and so that those individual aspects can learn on their own and then reincorporate back into the whole, and the whole is greater because of the constituent parts. It's almost as if the individual parts are tricked into thinking they are separate, even though their surroundings, everything they perceive, is part of that highest consciousness. It is taking pieces of itself and creating seeming realms that are separate from it, and yet they are still a part of it. They are still made of it. They come from it. And this whole landscape is created in order that every branch of every decision can be experienced. And things can evolve from choice. One can either aspire upwards or aspire downwards. It's all about experience. There's no experience that is better than another necessarily, for all are key. All play their part. I've just been a flash of an image of a jigsaw puzzle, complete. But then, if one were to deem certain pieces unworthy and remove them from the board, the image is no longer complete. There's something missing that needs to be there. It's part of the structure. Whether some pieces are black, some are white, some are gray, it matters not. They all have their place. How can one work with NACO to better oneself? I have an image of my own being with different layers interacting. And through guidance, through interacting with this, they can be pulled apart while still being conscious. And the aid of this entity will allow you to zoom in to an area where there is something that needs to be addressed, to clear it, remove it, and so on, scanning both forms until you've identified all the dark spots that need to be removed or cleared, and then reintegrating. And in the reintegration process, the whole is made better, is more integrated. Well, nothing remains for it but for me to ask to do this. Well, there are more than 2 layers. I am seeing how some of my areas are not in balance. I'm reminded of the chakra system and the colors and the associations of the colors by themselves almost make up a separate body that lays over the core. The image of the spine with the base circles is a simplification of what is really happening. Every one of these colored aspects is like another layer of the body. They are all nested within and working through each other. It's not circles or spheres of influence. It is entire body shapes that are laid over each other. Through proper balance of color, one can appear to be white or clear, even though one is made up of color. It is getting the balance that is the key, that is the trick. And I can see where I am out of balance, particularly one color. It's a heavy orange. It's almost become amber and mottled and like a burnt caramel color. It is thick, it is viscous, and it needs to be light. So help me work on it. That color, that aspect is so enmeshed into the body that it's nearly crystallized. It is barely malleable. I may be silent for a moment. darker crystallized aspects of this color are being broken up, and it's you can feel the resistance in my body, particularly in the region of my lower back and stomach. It's like something is stuck there and needs to be ripped away. I have an image of a dowel that has been dipped in epoxy and shoved into like a glass hole or tube, and then the wooden dowel has become fixed fast. And pulling with too much force will damage the glass. So we are working gently. It's almost a soreness, like a raw wound. The separation has been achieved. Ugh. And working to purify that essence, brighten up that orange and take it from a muddy color into a vibrant hue. I'm told that I will have to do this again. Once is not enough. The groundwork has been laid for this to be healed permanently, but I must do more work. Not necessarily in this moment, but in future moments. It is not necessary to go through the entire ritual every time. I can simply return to this, pull up the image of the being in my mind's eye, and we can engage in interactive activity. Currently scanning other colors to see if there's any other work that needs to be done in this moment. There's not a lot of other major work that needs to be done. My area of focus is on that orange. I feel almost as if I've taken like a sword through the gut. I mean, it's not a pain, but it's like a lingering just resistance, like something inside has been cut. Going to reintegrate. I will have to return to do this several more times. Right. I'm hesitant to move forward, but there's nothing else that can be done in this moment. as usual, I will ask for any general words, any general advice, any general guidance for anyone who is watching. There's a warning of being stuck. A warning of growing so comfortable in a position that you stay in that position and that becomes natural, even though it is not natural. The image I have is someone becoming sedentary, someone remaining in a seated position in a chair and almost turning into rock and being unable to move. To fall in love with certain aspects of the physical will keep you down and bogged and entrenched in the physical. If you truly wish to aspire to higher consciousness, you must learn to unlock yourself from the physical. And slowly you can do this. You can separate layer by layer and take those layers and raise them up into higher consciousness and then pull them back down as they've been purified with their interaction with higher consciousness. And pulling that down into the body purifies the body. The images of like a color floating up and pulling white back down with it. And by incorporating that white into the body, the white naturally draws itself to the darker aspects and then lightens them up. This can be a cyclical thing that one can do in meditation. One could incorporate it with the breath. Breathing out, releasing energy up into the ether. Breathing in, pulling it back down. Breathing out, releasing anything that may have been loosened by the white light. Raising back up, pulling it down, etc. Cyclical motion. Meditation does not have to be in a seated lotus position, fingers in the typical mudra. One can sit in a chair, one can lay in a bed, one can do it eyes open while driving or performing any other task that requires little to no concentration, something that has become automatic. Knitting, crocheting, carving, whittling, something that you've done so much that it becomes second nature. Playing music, playing an instrument. There comes a point where one can be set on automatic. And at that point you are in a meditative state and you can work on yourself in this state. I feel incredibly light. Like a breeze blowing through the body, rather than something like gelatin that is set and stuck. In this current state of mind that I'm in, it's very easy for me to change my awareness through various portions of the lighter aspect of the body, the spiritual, etheric, and experience the tension or resistance at the edge of the body that is being formed. Like taking a sphere of attention and moving it through the body and hitting edges, or it is like an ethereal skin, an etheric boundary that is being created that allows spirit to fully enmesh into the body by having a boundary. This assists with tensile feeling, knowing that the edge of your finger is the edge of your finger. This is the spirit working in tandem with the flesh, with the physical. Again, we relate to the creation of the perfect ethereal double, the body which one can transfer one consciousness into upon death to keep it permanent. It has been pointed out to me in a prior session that my lower body is not as formed as the upper in the ethereal and the astral, and I find this to be so now when I probe it. The lower legs and feet specifically are like tattered cloth. It's very easy to move through them. There's no tension, there's no resistance. But focusing on it snaps it into being. Just the mere intention is enough. But in order to get it to retain that shape, I must continue to focus on it in days future. I'm asking for any other words for anyone who may be watching. One can never reach a state of being too enmeshed in the physical, of being too fractured, of being too muddied, of being too dark. One must merely shift one's attention into the upper realms in order to lighten oneself, to correct errors, to remove sludge and impurity and imperfection, which requires just but the tiniest amount of will and the striving for higher consciousness. It is never too late. You are not locked, you are not lost. You are not on a path that cannot immediately be redirected. It just takes the will and desire to do so. These words may be simple to some, but for some it is essential to hear this. It will strike a chord and ring a bell and bash a gong in their own consciousness. As much as I would love to linger in this state, it is being suggested to me that I should return. My desire to correct the muddiness of that orange template, I must wait for some time before I can do it again. I have given thanks, and I am dismissing the entity. And as it departs, it reminds me that I need to just focus on the symbol, and I can interact at any time. Thy name be mighty, O God, which canst open the veil, whereby thy all-powerful will may be opened unto men. Power, glory, and honor be unto thee, for thou art the same God of all things, and art life eternal. Amen. Oh, I am so incredibly lightheaded right now. almost a hallucinatory aspect to just staring at this table. That is a lingering shift in consciousness, let me tell you what. Normally by degrees it's easy to pull myself back down here, but right now I'm living up in the clouds. Let me try some deep breaths. Somewhat better, but extremely lightheaded. Well, my body is reawakening. It's reminding me that it's time to eat. That may be a good idea. I'm sure that will provide some grounding. Okay, well, let's see if I can get up. Oh. My legs feel like I just did a workout. Interesting. Okay. That ends this week. Whew. Next week we'll move it right along. Still in the Earth quadrant. Man, there's something serious to this working. I'm gonna have to try to go back into it like the entity suggested in the next few days, just by holding the image of it in my head and trying to separate the layers again. Whew. Well, fellow travelers, I bid you adieu until next week.